But this is from Caitlyn Clark herself. I'd hope to share a better update, but I will not be returning to play the season. I spent hours in the gym every day with the singular goal of getting back out there. Disappointed isn't a big enough word to describe how I'm feeling. I want to thank everyone who has had my back through all this uncertainty. This has been incredibly frustrating, but even in the bad, there is good. And the way the fans continue to show up for me and for the Fever brought me so much joy and important perspective. I'm so proud of how this team has only gotten stronger through adversity this year. Now it's time to close out the season and claim our spot in the playoffs.
It just required one phrase. The WNBA's whole foundation began to tremble when Caitlyn Clark spoke one statement. It was not a shot that won the game. It was not a highlight that went viral. The league did not even think they could hide the injury update in a news statement. After months of polished propaganda and hollow promises, it was one unvarnished phrase that cut through. It is not a large enough term, disappointed. She said as much. Not only did those 5 words reverberate across her fanbase, but they exploded. It could have sounded to the outside world like a celebrity complaining about a season that did not work out. However, that statement was more than simply annoyance to those who had been attentively observing, the fans who had seen the bruises, the cheap shocks, the authorities' silence, and the never-ending barrage of ambiguous information. It served as confirmation, verification that all of their fears were real. It was not simply terrible luck. This was not simply another famous person suffering an injury. It was a betrayal. Additionally, supporters do not just leave when they feel deceived. They retaliate. What followed was not a typical news cycle because of this. It was not a blip. It was the beginning of something far greater. The WNBA is now collapsing in real time due to a mutiny, a surge of rage, distrust, and retaliation. Because fans felt taken advantage of, deceived, and neglected for months. They saw how the league failed to safeguard Caitlyn Clark while profiting from her abilities. When they pleaded for explanations, they were met with blank statements meant to keep their wallets open and their hopes alive. And those same fans decided they had had enough when Caitlyn Clark finally stood out for herself and tore off the last layer of denial. They had no intention of waiting for the league to make amends. They refused to accept justifications. They decided to make their own message instead. If you appreciate this content, consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel. Believe it or not, more than 83% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. It's free and only takes a second, but it means the world to us. So, did you subscribe already? Great. Thank you so much for your support. Now, back to the video. A forceful and scathing speech that is now endangering the WNBA's very existence. This is the part that no one wants to acknowledge. Critics, competing leagues, or a lack of interest were not external factors in its downfall. It originated internally. From the conceit of executives who believed that supporters would never rebel, to the avarice that jeopardized the health of the lone player who propelled them into the public eye. That risk was unsuccessful. And now the retaliation is taking place in front of us. However, how could a single instance, a single phrase, or a fracture in the facade result in the whole collapse of a league? We must go back to the initial betrayal, the one that supporters are still unable to forgive, in order to comprehend that. A news conference, a microphone, and a weary countenance that had carried a whole league on her shoulders made the event itself seem practically unremarkable. However, Caitlyn Clark's remarks that day went beyond just providing an update on her health. They were the spark that ignited everything. It is not a large enough term, disappointed. It was unprocessed. It had a keen edge. Furthermore, it was more than simply a player ranting to anybody who had been listening. It was an acknowledgement that there had been more going on behind the scenes. Athletes did not discuss recuperation with their fans. At last, they broke through the propaganda and heard the reality. They had been given a continuous diet of ambiguous medical reports, daily status reports, and constant assurances from the front desk that everything was okay for months. Fans, however, are not blind. They saw the accumulation of bruises. They saw the suffering that Caitlyn Clark was going through. When it was clear she was not ready, they saw her rushing back into the court. And now Caitlyn Clark verified what they had always assumed with a single, straightforward statement. It was not only deception. It had been a lie. This was more than simply a statement because of this. The catalyst was this. Because when a celebrity like Caitlyn Clark, the lone performer in charge of record ticket sales, national TV appearances, and the unexpected spike in popularity, finally acknowledges that she is being pushed beyond her breaking point, fans do not just shrug and go on. Every phrase seems to be directed at them. And that is precisely what took place. Her words were like a hammer. Fans heard treachery rather than disappointment. They learned that in order to secure a few more weeks of ticket sales and TV ratings, the league, the coaches, and the executives had taken a risk with their hero's future. The problem with betrayal is as follows. There is no stillness in the conclusion. It blows up. The topic changed very immediately. This was no longer about an injury. This was about a breach of trust, about a league that bungled a cultural phenomena at every opportunity after receiving it. Fans who had been mistreated and strung along for months used Clark's remarks as a rallying cry. Accusations, conjecture, and rage erupted on social media. People began calling out names. People were looking for answers. Additionally, the league was no longer in charge of the story for the first time. They were the fans. At this time, the whole fan base looked at one another and quietly decided that if the league was going to play games with them, they were going to play one back. This was the moment when irritation changed into action and disappointment turned into retaliation. Here's the twist, however. That news conference was not the beginning of the rage. Clark's remarks served as the catalyst. The fire had been smoldering in plain sight for a long time. And you have to start from the beginning to really see how this all got out of hand. The first betrayal that made fans anxious. Fans have been uncomfortable long before Caitlyn Clark's revelations raised red flags. Press announcements were not necessary to alert them to the problem. Every game, they were able to see it firsthand. Defenders were not the only ones who targeted Clark from the beginning of her rookie campaign. They were pursuing her. There appeared to be an additional push on every drive to the hoop. Every screen seemed like a justification for a cheap shot. There were hard fouls that went beyond being tough, elbows to the ribs, and times when it seemed more like intimidation than defense. What action did the league take? Nothing. The first betrayal was that. Because it is easy to bring in a generational star, the kind of player that elevates the WNBA to new heights. Keep her safe. As millions of new fans watch the game, make sure she can play it. Officials chose to swallow their whistles instead. Fans had to see Clark being knocked to the ground without any repercussions as the league ignored the blows. The term targeting quickly became popular. Videos of her getting fouled went viral on social media. There were no responses to the fans' demands. League executives seemed to ignore the issue rather than take action, as if recognizing it would imply that they had no control over it. And the quiet spoke a lot. Because people were investing in Clark rather than simply watching her perform. They were purchasing tickets, jerseys, and subscriptions due to a single player who brought previously unheard of significance to the league. They also anticipated, at the very least, that the WNBA would look after her. However, it did not occur. Rather, the league pretended nothing was wrong while allowing her to suffer abuse. Additionally, supporters who pleaded for protection were dismissed with the same justification. It is just the game's physicality. Fans, however, were aware of this. This was not typical. This was careless. This was risky. It built up to every uncalled foul, every cheap shot that went unnoticed, and every time Clark had to go off the court by herself. Supporters kept score. The harm was visible to them in real time. And it seemed like a smack in the face that the league would not intervene. Fans did not consider Clark's eventual breakdown at the news conference to be an unexpected turn of events. They believed that months of neglect would inevitably lead to it. They had been alerting anybody who would pay attention. From the stands, they had been yelling it. And suddenly the very thing they were afraid of has materialized. Because it was avoidable, this was the most serious betrayal. Additionally, it left supporters with a resentful question. What else were the league ready to jeopardize behind closed doors if they could not even defend its most talented player on the court? That query would soon have an answer. And it was worse than anybody could have predicted. If authorities disregarded Clark's safety in the first betrayal, then much closer to home, the same institution she trusted to safeguard her future was the source of the second. If the first betrayal was the league's silence on the court, the second one was far more painful since it originated inside Clark's own home. The Indiana Fever, the squad that selected her, the group that pledged to support her, shield her, and make her the face of their future. Rather, what viewers saw did not seem to be any kind of defense. It seemed to be exploitation. Whispers were the first. Clark had been hobbling. After games, she was clutching her side. Although fans were aware of the suffering, official updates were always ambiguous and upbeat. She goes about her daily business. We anticipate her return shortly. It was just a little setback. The same repeated phrases again and over. However, there was more going on beneath those remarks. Clark was not getting better. They were hurrying her. Fans soon put it together. They were aware that she had suffered a severe blow at the hands of the Liberty. That ought to have been the warning sign, the moment to stop her, give her time to heal, and safeguard the investment that was really holding the WNBA afloat. The Indiana Fever, however, took the opposite action. They pushed her back onto the court weeks ahead of schedule by dangling her comeback like bait. For what purpose? Sales of tickets, ratings, and immediate income. The rage erupted at that point. Because this has nothing to do with miscalculating a chronology. This was about the individuals who were meant to protect her career betraying her confidence. Immediately, fans called it out. Not ready, she is. Her health is at jeopardy because of you. Despite their star's obvious breakdown, the front office continued to behave as if everything was under control, grinning for the cameras. And there was a huge outcry when Clark's season ultimately came to an end. Supporters did not hold back. They gave names. Kelly Krauskopf, Amber Cox, and Stephanie White. These were not impersonal evildoers. Fans thought that these actual individuals, decision-makers, had gambled with $1 billion talent. They were no longer just executives to the fan base. They were dishonest. They were manipulators. Additionally, they had destroyed all of Clark's goodwill in order to make money. It was hard to ignore the facts. Every time Clark was set to perform, ticket sales surged. TV networks used Clark as the focal point of whole shows. Sponsors waited in queue at the front desk and the entrance. Even for her health, they could not take the chance of all that momentum failing. They therefore made their decision. They prioritized profit over loyalty and business above safety. Fans concluded they could no longer trust anything coming out of Indianapolis at that point. Every ambiguous update, every forced grin at a news appearance, every assertion that Clark was almost prepared. In retrospect, it all seemed to be a hoax. While the truth was held behind closed doors, fans felt pressured and exploited for every last dollar. That was the second betrayal. Because it hurts when opponents betray you. Official betrayal infuriates. However, you cannot forgive treachery from the same individuals you rely on to steer your career. Everything else began to fall apart after fans acknowledged that the Indiana Fever front office had let her down. Fans realized that the only way to retaliate against executives who were just concerned with income was to take that cash away if the Indiana Fever team was only focused on making money. And the consequences were terrible, instantaneous, and unavoidable. Overnight, ticket prices that had been quite high plummeted. Games that had previously seemed like must-see events now seemed to be ghost towns. A season's worth vanished in a matter of weeks. The supporters were well aware of what they were doing. They were not just leaving. They were exacting revenge. The supporters would turn the tables if the league and the Indiana Fever had risked Clark's health for financial gain. They would target their wallets, which harmed them the most. At that point, the plot changed from one of betrayal to one of retaliation. Because the subsequent financial meltdown was not an accident. It was not unlucky. It was a planned event. An angry fan base decided as a group to punish the same system that had deceived them. Whether the league had mistreated Caitlyn Clark was no longer the issue. Her admirers could clearly see that. How much harm the supporters could do in retaliation was the question. More than any WNBA player could have predicted. The front staff was utterly mistaken if they believed that supporters would just swallow their annoyance and continue to attend. Because fans elected to change the course of events after seeing that the league and the Indiana Fever had prioritized profit above protection. Money would be the penalty if it were the driving force. And that is precisely what took place. The same people abruptly closed their wallets after paying hundreds of dollars to watch Caitlyn Clark perform live. Once the most sought-after sporting events quickly become chilly. It was hardly a slow decline. It was not nuanced. It happened right away. It was also vicious. Consider the Chicago Sky game. Tickets for merely sitting in the building skyrocketed to around $400 while Clark was performing. You may enter for $7 upon the revelation of her injury. $7, which is less than what a fast restaurant combination lunch would cost. That is destruction, not a decrease. By relocating their game against the Indiana Fever to a bigger venue in Baltimore and relying on Clark's ability to generate thousands of more spectators, the Washington Mystics believed they were being astute. However, demand plummeted after she was excluded. Prices fell from $41 to $22. A whole area was vacant. Instead of being a showpiece event, it became a humiliating reminder of how much the league relied on a single individual. And it did not end there. Teams in the WNBA were kept in the dark about games that no one was interested in watching. Sales of merchandise stopped. Prices in secondary markets fell. As cameras moved over half-empty stadia, the program lost its vigor. To keep the money coming in, the league had taken a chance on Clark's star power. Without her, fan anger was causing the whole system to collapse. Why was this different? Because supporters were well aware of what they were doing, it seemed like real retaliation. They had lost interest in basketball, therefore they were not staying at home. To convey a message, they were remaining at home. You misled us. You kept us going. And now we are reclaiming our money, the one thing you value most. It was a surgically precise act of financial retaliation. Every empty seat, slashed ticket price, and unsold jersey was another setback for a league that believed its supporters would never rebel. It was an obvious message. Your star is not something you can treat like a throwaway. You cannot deceive those who pay your expenses and hope for no repercussions. The resounding arenas that had once been full of chants were now silent, and the consequences were staring them in the face. Fans, however, continued to exact retribution. Because even as ticket sales plummeted, there was another blow coming from higher up, the national sports media. Furthermore, the league's issues shifted from financial to existential when those who dominated the discourse abandoned it. The media's silence was the last blow if the empty stadia and falling ticket prices were the first indicators of a problem. The WNBA had been enjoying an unprecedented level of attention for months. Primetime coverage, national headlines, and viral videos that overflowed social media. It was all because of one person, Caitlyn Clark. She was everywhere, not just covered. Her highlights kicked off talk programs. She was the focus of whole segments created by sports radio broadcasters. To capitalize on her momentum, the network changed their schedules. However, as soon as she left, the spotlight disappeared rather than dimming. And that quiet was more audible than any jeers from the spectators. Consider Jason Whitlock. He was not only critical of the league. He made it clear that he was done. He believed that without Clark on the court, the WNBA was not worth a second of television. Then came Colin Cowherd, one of the nation's leading sports commentators, on his nationally distributed program. He acknowledged that he led his program 6 times with Caitlyn Clark during the previous season. That is unprecedented. Leading a program with the same athlete, even twice in a single year, is uncommon in sports radio. But Clark was that strong. Additionally, Cowherd made no mention of the WNBA this season. Never once. He gave a brutally straightforward explanation. Clark was not having fun. And the narrative would not exist without her. Sports media is not simply about covering games, therefore that is the aspect that should scare the league. It is about influencing the national dialogue. You also lose relevance when the tastemakers determine that you are unimportant. Fans may leave because they feel deceived. That is not good. The cost of tickets may plummet. That is much worse. That is the death shot, however, when the media ignores it. Because you completely cease to exist in the larger sports world if no one with a platform is discussing your league. It goes beyond Clark's absence. It is about what her absence made clear. Because in reality, the WNBA had not established a basis. They believed the phenomenon they had been handed would remain forever. However, the media stopped wasting time when they saw the league was unable to defend its lone superstar. Please share your thoughts in the comments section, subscribe, and enable all notifications so you don't miss anything. We'll see you in the next one after you click the video on the screen.